with Chapter 8, Heads Shaved and Ordination, a Radical Shift. As once famously neurotic bald man once said about confidence in the bald man, well, I'll let him keep the quote. But he wasn't wrong. If you're curious, look up Larry David's great line. When you make the decision to participate in monastic life, it's not something you stumble into like a yoga retreat with robes. It's a commitment. Real, deliberate, and definitely not half assed. Part of that commitment is studying and adhering to the disciplined lifestyle you're about to live, including, at the very least, adhering to the 8 precepts. And a part of that commitment is participating in all ceremonies with an open heart, a willing spirit, and ideally, without trying to sneak in snacks. November 5th, 2024. Praveja Rehearsal Day. The first ceremony that demanded our full presence, not just physically, but soulfully, is the head shaving ritual called Praveja. In the West, we blandly refer to it as tonsure, which sounds like something you get at a spa with cucumber water. But no, this isn't a casual spin in the barber's chair where you chat about Giants box scores and who they're trading next season. This is a rite of passage, a mundana. Praveja, the day of Mandana, is thick with symbolism and ceremony. The literal translation means to go forth. Its historical lineage dating back to the Vedic writings and rituals. It marks the transition of an ordinary man into bhikkhu, a monk, and it begins with the very literal stripping away of ego. Your head is shaved, your eyebrows too, and of course the regulation face scrape. Everything goes. In the Buddhist view, facial and head hair are signs of vanity, and vanity has got no place under the Bodhi tree. According to Vinaya, the ancient rulebook of the Buddhist canon, head shaving isn't a one time ego purge. It's a regular ritual done on every new and full moon, a Posada day, which averages out to twice a month. Though, as I quickly learned, plenty of monks just go ahead and shave it all off every single day. Bald is beautiful and apparently spiritually efficient. We knew this day was coming. Most of us approached it with a mix of curiosity and mild dread, especially our brother Peace Love from California, whose magnificent golden dreadlocks had become something of a legend. If you've ever grown dreads, you understand. This wasn't just a haircut, it was a full on sacrificial offering. His hair was a lifestyle, symbolic, and possibly had its own glossy magazine. Another source of my personal unease? Eyebrows. Specifically, the unsettling rumor that once you shave them off after a certain age, they may never return. Or worse, they might come back all wiry and chaotic, like an aged mad professor who's just seen something unspeakable in his particle accelerator. I didn't want that energy permanently affixed to my face. And then there was the weather. It had been solid gray and rainy for the week. Not a dramatic monsoon, just a slow, moody drizzle. Cool but not cold, persistent and wet enough to make the idea of bare feet and ceremonial smocks feel less sacred and more soggy. The I Retreat complex, located across a small bridge that spanned the Luang River, around a couple bends and up the mud-slicked dirt road, was our sister complex to I Monastery, and was for lay Buddhists to stay at, meditate, and receive some Dhamma wisdom without taking vows of monkhood. Much of I Retreat was still under construction, but the crown jewel of the facility was a stunning, open sided pavilion with a soaring roof, had been completed in the nick of time, as if the universe demanded it be there for our big debut. It was beautiful, and our ceremony would be its grand opening act. We climbed the gently sloping road, winding past vegetable patches and fruit trees, then up and back behind the pavilion to a makeshift, questionably engineered wooden staircase leading to a longhouse. It creaked, ominously. Nails protruded at just the right height to snag a shin or a robe, a gentle reminder that enlightenment can still involve tetanus. Once again, the Bante roll came calling, which meant I'd be leading the Sangha. Inside the pavilion, the setup was impressive. A large U shaped arrangement of stations, 7 on each side, with a long table at the bottom of the U for visiting dignitaries. Outside the U ring was set up for family and guests. Cushions, chairs, and benches all in place. The middle layer was occupied by low tables for our bowls and other ceremonial necessities, and the innermost ring was where we would sit, facing outward, awaiting our transformation. Behind our chairs, ample space had been left for the honored guest barbers, those joining in the privilege of shearing away our hair, one symbolic snip at a time. For them, it was a spiritual honor. For us, it was the beginning of something else entirely. Down those treacherous stairs, then a hard left, followed by 14 slick, grassy, and now quite swampy steps, across a makeshift wooden walkway that flexed, bowed, and groaned underfoot, and finally onto the stone pavilion floor. From there, we followed the arc of the elongated U, starting from the right, continuing around until the U was filled and each of us landed behind our assigned seats. All of this was to be executed at a slow, dignified pace, timed to some rather enthusiastic music flowing through a PA system. This was not a casual stroll. It was an exercise in choreographed poise. Chin high, eyes forward, an expression of serene detachment on our faces, or our best attempt at one while sloshing through wet grass. We each carried a ceremonial platter, large, lacquered, and solemn, its contents arranged just so: banana leaves serving as an elegant placemat, trimming and shaving tools laid out on top. It was meant to project grace and gravitas. I was wet, anxious, and trying to ignore the fact that a leech had taken up residence on my person. A tiny, bloated Count Dracula happily gorged himself on my ankle. Because a Praveja ceremony is steeped in history and symbolism, we were encouraged to invite loved ones to witness it. I had no one to invite. Or, more truthfully, no one would come if I had. Others did. Their families showed up in full force. Mothers, fathers, partners, old friends flying in from New Zealand, Australia, Vietnam, the US, and Europe. They came with flowers, smiles, and tears. I stood to the side, watching it all unfold, feeling something like awe laced with ache. I hadn't realized how profound this moment would be, not only for us as we surrendered our hair, ego, and names, but for those who came to witness our transformation. When rehearsals finally wrapped, our teachers gave their approval. I got glowing marks for leadership, which inflated me just enough to imagine I might actually pull this thing off with dignity. My brothers and I made our way back down the muddy road to the monastery. I was eager to get that blood sucking worm, who was now bloated, off my foot. I showered in the hottest water I could stand, changed into dry clothes, and joined the others for hot tea, cocoa, or coffee. We lounged and chatted, waiting for evening meditation and bed. I woke the next morning to the patter of rain so relentless it sounded like it was trying to tunnel through the thatched roof. Thunder rolled in like a cosmic timpani section. Any hope for a mild, sunny ceremony evaporated. The day was dark, the air cool and wet. The road to the monastery was tough on a good day. That day, it was borderline biblical. After our morning obligations, back we trudged to I Retreat, where music and an MC's warm up chatter already filled the air. It was early, but the show was underway. There was no going back, and no rain delay announced by Buddhist umpires. At least we had umbrellas. Up in the jungle longhouse, perched high above the pavilion, we waited. We'd been issued our first ceremonial shirts, poncho style tops in blue, red, and black colors, paired with pale blue sarongs. We milled about, sipping hot tea, water, or sodas, nervous energy fizzing just under the surface. Monks flitted around us like high school prom chaperones, attentive and a little giddy. It was all somehow both sacred and completely human. There was a strange vibe in the room. The usual talkers had gone quiet, pacing off alone. The introverts were suddenly chatty and aglow. It felt like we had all stepped into an alternate universe where everyone responded to stress by swapping personalities. Some brothers took the ceremony with profound solemnity, their expressions reflecting the deep weight of tradition. Others seemed to treat it like a cultural excursion with spiritual flair. I sat somewhere in between. I felt the weight of it, this rite of passage, the ancient thread we were all weaving into. But I also couldn't shake the surreal awareness that I'd be back in linen pants and eating from street carts in a few weeks. For all the ceremony's gravitas, I knew of only two of us who had plans to continue their monastic training beyond the month. And yet, there was something about it. Leading these men felt apocal, sacred, temporary, yes, but very real. Being Bante, as I've said, came with certain privileges, some small, some profound. This one stopped me in my tracks. Luang P. Phop, my indefatigable monk mentor with the calm patience of a saint and the bounce of a Buddhist golden retriever, pulled me aside just before the ceremony. Because I was Bante and had no family here, I was being granted a great honor. Fornsan Kamlang Ek herself would serve as my ceremonial mother. This was not some symbolic gesture made for convenience. In Thai culture, the role of a mother, biological or ceremonial, is imbued with immense spiritual weight, especially during rites of passage. To be given a mother is to be given a lineage, a place, a kind of invisible scaffolding of belonging. And I was being given Forsan Kamleng Ek, the formidable matriarch behind the entire monk life project. Alongside her husband, General Arthit, she had built this cross continental initiative up from a disheveled organization, personally shaping the path that brought so many of us to this moment of transformation. I nodded, mouth dry, heart pounding. The others had their mothers or fathers, siblings, and friends. I had Fornsan Kamleng Ek, which is kind of like showing up to the prom with the Queen of Thailand as your dance partner. It was absurd, it was overwhelming, and it was one of the greatest honors of my life. My first thought, doesn't she have more important things to do? Apparently not. She would be with me through all three, yep, count 'em, three ceremonies. It was time. I rose on the cue from Luang P. Phop and led our group in orderly file to the launch spot at the top of the steps, trying to keep the rain from my eyes, waiting for the green light from ceremonial ops. Word came. Phop gave me his trademark grin and nod, and as I turned the corner and descended the steps, leading our stately little monk parade, I realized the pavilion was packed. I mean, packed. Crammed wall to wall with people. I didn't have the foggiest idea where they had come from. I retreat is in the middle of nowhere. I was half convinced these people were forest spirits or mushroom fairies who had sprouted from the mud and mist, popping into existence in our small space in the world, because Chiang Mai is 2 hours away and it had been raining for days. Tadpole sized drops, no less. I was curious as to their motivation and the determination of these observers to be with us during that sacred ceremony. With subtle side eye scanning, the serene monk like kind, I tried to keep my peaceful gaze intact while doing some quick math. Best I could tell, there were over 400 people present, many who had minimal or no direct affiliation with thy monastery. They came to witness our transformation, and somehow that was both awe inspiring and absolutely nerve shredding. Rarely in my life have I felt as relieved as I did when it became clear that I had led my Sangha without incident. No tripping, no slipping, no accidental flying lacquer platters, and my slow, stately pace had been pulled off with grace. As I took my seat at the head of the U, I allowed myself a deep breath. The hard part, I thought, was done. Now I could retreat into my own little bubble and just be a ceremonial monk for a while. Then I turned, looked across the great divide past my chair, the low slung table, and to the other side, and locked eyes with Fornsan Kamlang Ek, who was beaming at me with what can only be described as maternal pride. And just like that, my nervous system rebooted back into DEFCON 1. The first ceremony after our grand entrance and seating was the public participation hair snipping. Step right up, folks, and don't forget your scissors. My person, the matriarch of the entire monastic order, kicked off the ritual by clipping a few strands of my hair, placing them gently on the banana leaf placemat draped over the platter in my lap. We exchanged greetings, at which point she said something that blew my mind. She was honored to serve as my mother for the day. She said that quietly, kindly, and with sincerity I could feel. I tumbled into ease within seconds of her pronouncement. After that brief moment, she moved on to the next monk in progress, as a new person approached me, smiling warmly, wielding sharp scissors. Everyone had incredibly kind things to say, or, for those not fluent in English, offered big, beaming smiles that lit up their whole face. Or they would place a gentle hand on my shoulder in a manner that conveyed, "It's all going to be okay." They'd lock eyes like I was the only soul in the universe, and then snip, off came another chunk of my ego. Our California Rasta, dreadlocks dyed a golden sunburst, and our tall, affable Russian, whose flowing blonde mane gave off strong Bee Gees circa 1978 vibes, were especially popular with the scissor happy crowd. But once the initial carnage had passed, and everyone who wanted to go had had their ceremonial snip, it was time for phase two, the full head shave. Only ordained monks are allowed to perform this next part of the ritual, which I found oddly comforting. At least I wouldn't end up the victim of some rogue Buddhist fangirl or boy reenacting a Sweeney Todd moment in the jungle. It's Thailand. Stranger things have happened. As my new mom for the day sat across from me, we chatted quietly about life. How funny it is. How unpredictable it can be. How sometimes you wake up thinking it's a normal rainy day and end up bald in front of 400 strangers. Fornson was gracious, deeply kind, and effortlessly present in that way powerful people sometimes are, like they've bent time to sit with you. For a fleeting moment, I felt like being Bante wasn't just an odd cosmic joke. I felt deeply honored to fill that role, and promised myself I would do it with grace through the rest of my tenure. That's when I noticed the monk standing behind me with razor in hand wasn't just any monk. It was my monk, the abbot, Venerable Narong Chai Thunjayo, a man of razor sharp intellect, warm humor, and a smile that could melt or incinerate depending on the context. His usual smile was radiant and generous, but I'd also seen his "Did you really just say that?" version, a smile so dry it could start a brush fire. I glanced up at him just as he was poised for the ceremonial first scrape and whispered, "You've done this before, right?" With a wink. Without missing a beat, he giggled. Yes, my abbot giggled, then placed a hand gently on my shoulder and replied, "Maybe." A jokester with a razor. Perfect. Dip in the water, scrape, dip, scrape, repeat. As he shaved my head bald for the first time since I emerged from the womb, my mom for the day and I kept talking about her life, my life, love, loss, change, the whole pad thai. I swear I could feel waves of energy pulsing off her like she was a benevolent force field. I'd noticed that wherever she walked, people moved, not out of fear, but reverence. The kind of reverence that says, this woman probably knows where all the bodies are buried and has blessed each site personally. By the time I was smooth as a cue ball and feeling like my scalp was made of industrial grade micro Velcro, it was time to lead our band of baldies back up the slick steps to the longhouse. There, more monks waited, ready to inspect for stray hairs. And just when we thought it was over, we got a treat. A nice, bracing splash of cold mountain water to rinse off nicks, cuts, and what little ego remained. I was lucky I escaped without bloodshed. Others looked like they'd headbutted a rose bush. Kop kun krab, Venerable Narong Chai. That's thank you, sir, in Thai. Though in that moment I meant, thanks for not turning my scalp into a bloody battleground, sir. We were instructed to change into new, pure white front button shirts that looked vaguely Indian, the next layer in our ceremonial cake, as the first stage of our transformation was complete. Much like a kurta shirt, but shorter, we huddled around steaming cups of hot tea, trying to thaw out from the damp chill while waiting to be summoned for the next ceremonial phase of the day. It was then, sipping tea and assessing the damage, that we collectively realized just how profoundly a face changes when it's stripped of hair and eyebrows. The effect was disorienting. Guys I'd been brushing teeth next to all week suddenly looked like strangers. There were some hard blinks and puzzled stares, the kind you give someone at a reunion when you're 70% sure they were in your class, but 100% unsure if that's their original face. That middle stage of ceremony, the gifting of our saffron robes and alms bowls, would lead up to the culmination of our long, soggy day. Monks are not allowed to buy their own robes or alms bowls. Those must be donated. This is one of the primary reasons you'll see donation boxes at Buddhist monasteries all over the world. Dressing a monk, it turns out, is expensive. Enlightenment may be free, but the dry cleaning isn't. And then it was time. I gathered my newly minted cue ball crew and led my sangha down the slippery steps again as music blasted from the speakers. All the while, the ever cheerful MC rattled off announcements about upcoming monastery events and ways to help, donate, or get involved with our community outreach programs. Honestly, she was having a blast. I'm pretty sure she could have sold raffle tickets and t shirts and no one would have batted an eye. We took our seats once more, sitting a little taller, a little prouder. We were only a day away from full ordination now. There was still some chanting to do to bring everyone into the right headspace, and so we dove in. Thankfully, we'd been rehearsing these chants for over a week, so memory kicked in and we entered that sweet fake it till you make it zone, our mouths moving more or less in time with the syllables, our souls catching up as best they could. Back at our assigned stations, our seats had vanished while we were up in the longhouse, sacrificed to the gods of sacred ceremony setup. This was the most solemn part of the day, the moment our sponsors, our people, or in my case, my newly adopted ceremonial mom, would present us with our robes. There were songs, there were speeches, there was a stately presentation by our abbot and the head abbot of the entire Dhammakaya order, all performed with the kind of precision usually reserved for royal coronations. The robe package was elaborate. Two jiwan, one for everyday wear and a second one for special occasions, because monks need formal wear too. Our sabong or lower wraps, a cloth belt, and the piece de resistance, the golden sash that tied it all together. Think Buddhist haute couture, monk edition. We had been instructed to kneel in humble supplication, feet under bottoms, knees screaming in protest on the mat that really was not much of a mat, heads bowed, arms outstretched like supplicants in a Renaissance painting, palms up and ready to receive our robes. As the speeches stretched on into eternity, or at least far enough to consider faking a fainting spell, the packages were finally, mercifully placed into our aching arms. Then came the final act, the gifting of our alms bowls, or pata. These beautifully crafted, enameled brass bowls came with their own saffron colored cloth hammocks, the ultimate monk accessory. Thankfully, this part was brief. Once the bowls were placed in our hands, we were told to rise, our knees sending up little tiny prayers of gratitude. Ceremony concluded, I once again led my bald brethren up the slippery stairs to the longhouse, where seasoned monks helped us don our new saffron robes. Wrapped in orange for the first time, we descended once more into a crowd of tearful, proud faces. It felt monumental. Then came the paparazzi. Suddenly, we were in a full blown monk themed photo shoot. Cameras everywhere directing us into every imaginable pose. Videographers captured all of it while trying to stay out of sightline of the DSLRs. We were herded, grouped, regrouped. People we didn't know gushed with admiration. If this is what it felt like to be famous, I had serious empathy for Princess Diana and the tabloid betrayals that tried to destroy her. The symbolism of it all hit like a tidal wave. We were now public figures of a sort, stand ins for purity and discipline. No pressure. Back at the monastery, the mood shifted. You might expect celebration, camaraderie, or a rowdy late night tea party of reliving epic moments and sharing spiritual epiphanies. But none of that happened. Instead, we quietly peeled off in different directions, like leaves blown loose from a branch. No goodbyes, no see you at breakfast, not even a knowing nod. Just a slow, almost reverent dispersal into the jungle darkness. Something had settled over us. Not exhaustion exactly, though we were all bone tired. It was the weight of meaning. The ceremony had delivered a sort of finality that I felt inside, and now each of us had to sit with whatever had taken up residence. I slipped into my tent. The silence outside was deafening, and for the first time since I had arrived, I didn't feel isolated from the world. Ordination Day. I woke at 3 a.m., an hour ahead of schedule and a full 90 minutes before the first gong. It was dark. Not just dark, but mountainous, monastic dark. Even the bathroom portico lights had been turned off, which made me wonder if our wise, all knowing monks had intentionally killed the lights, knowing we'd be too nervous to sleep. Those guys were mystical clairvoyants with the bedtime instincts of Victorian nannies. We'd spent the past week preparing for this, memorizing two crucial lines we'd have to recite to our preceptor monk, ideally without butchering them into incomprehensible Pali gibberish. My monk name, Satibalo, means man of many abilities, which felt dishonest because memorization was not among my abilities. Not even a little. November 7th, a day of transformation. Did I mention it was cold? Colder than anything we'd felt yet up in our mountain hideaway. And of course, that day, when we'd be standing outside for much of it, it was the coldest day yet. It was also pouring, huge fat drops soaking everything in their earthbound path. That rain came with a chilled wraith that made me question every decision I'd made leading up to that day. After our usual morning routines, plus bonus touch up shaves for the baby faced guys whose hair grows faster than gossip in a small town, we prepared for the biggest moment of our monastic lives. All other duties were suspended. Today there was only one job: take the vows. Enter monkhood. No more training wheels, no more powder blue sabong and yellow sweatshirt. This was it. And despite the numbing rain, chilled feet, and a brain stubbornly refusing to recall line 2 of the Pali chant, I was ready. As I wrote above, rote memorization is not, nor has it ever been a talent I've possessed. In fact, the more important the memorization, the more my brain decides to throw a jazz riff into the mix. Improvising with heart? Sure, well, withholding precision. I always get there, just not in the way instructors or solemn faced preceptor monks might prefer. My brain is less recitation engine and more interpretive monologue. Given time, I can deliver. Give me a few days? Absolutely not. When they handed us the ordination study sheet, paragraph upon paragraph of ceremonial lines, chants, and call and response Pali, I experienced what can only be described as full body academic panic. There were whole call and response scripts, stories, and verbal obstacle courses. And then there were the two key lines: my solo, to be performed directly to the preceptor monk, at a special hall, miles away, in front of everyone. The make or break moment of the entire monastic rite. That's all. Again, no pressure. We donned our robes, or more accurately, I attempted to assemble my robe ensemble like a blindfolded chimpanzee attacking an origami kit. Thankfully, Luang P. Fop, my patient monk pal and now unofficial spiritual stylist, intervened before I could debut as a Picasso version of a monk. He gently pulled me aside and, with the quiet competence of a man who's done this hundreds of times, turned me into someone who looked like I belonged. I had nailed the sabong and belt, the monk version of pants, but the jiwan, the elaborate upper body wrap that had to be folded and draped just so, I was a complete disaster. Wrapping an enormous rectangular cloth around my torso with monastic elegance was not my strong suit. At this point, it was too late to back out. I was on the bus, as Cowboy Neil would say, and there you have it. You pay for your ticket, you take the ride. Loaded into two vans, we drove through misty mountain villages and fields of waving rice on our way to the ordination center, a 200-year-old ordination hall. So, yeah, brand new. Perched in the middle of a picturesque rice paddy, golden grains ripened around it like something out of a spiritual fairy tale as they shivered and shook with the onslaught of raindrops. A crowd of over 100 lay people had already gathered. Word had clearly gotten out that fresh monk was in season. Thankfully, our monastery monks once again played wardrobe supervisor, adjusting our robes and wiping our brows, making sure we looked the part. If I learned anything on this journey, it's that the Thai paparazzi are deeply committed to capturing a perfectly robed monk. The camera cranes and umbrella holding assistants made it feel more like a red carpet procession than a sacred ritual. It was time for me to be Bante again, the ceremonial starter pistol. My role was to light incense and candles and place them at the altar outside of the ordination hall in specific order, without screwing up. This had to be executed perfectly, or we'd have to cancel the ceremony and come back another time. I didn't want to be that guy. Just me, a side pavilion full of monks, 13 anxious fellow almost monks, a full audience, and enough camera lenses to film a Marvel reboot. I managed my role without a hitch because, well, I may have the recitation memory capabilities of a steel I beam, simple processes I can nail. Then came the hard part. Inside the tiny, ornate, airless ordination hall, packed wall to wall with monks lining the walls, we'd each go through our ordination in groups of three. As Bante, I was in the first group. Yay? Each round would take about 30 minutes of kneeling on wooden floors, back straight, feet folded under our butts like some kind of medieval Pilates challenge, palms pressed in prayer, sweat beating down our backs. We'd respond in Pali, line by line, to our preceptor, a wise ancient monk flown in like some ceremonial final boss, whom we'd never met. We trained for this all week. The rhythm, the logic of it had started to make sense. That is, until we hit the solo vows, the part where I, as Satipolo, had to recite my part from memory in front of everyone and promised to uphold 227 precepts to live cleanly, purely, honorably, intellectually, and spiritually. It was time. Preceptor, Kinamosi. Aham bante satibalo nana, I would respond. Preceptor, ko nama te upajihajo. Upajihajo no bante ayasama katadahamo nama. That would be my second response. Two short call and response lines. That happened to carry the weight of a supertanker. That was all I needed to memorize. You could commit them to memory in minutes, even if only phonetically. But my brain doesn't work that way. If it hadn't been for one of my kind, understanding teaching monks gently guiding me through the ceremony and subtly mouthing the lines in my line of sight, I might have been expelled from ordination. I need to understand, to feel the words, to grasp their meaning through translation before they can lodge themselves in my mind and heart. But there was no direct translation available. I nearly blew it, squeaking out my lines like a terrified little mouse. My dear brothers, who knew of my struggle with memorization, were sympathetic and supportive. I wish they'd laid on more pressure, cracked the whip a little, if only to get my brain to shape up and deliver. But they had their own lines to remember, their own tightrope to walk. In the end, I got through it. Not an Oscar worthy performance by any means, but it was enough to satisfy the preceptor. As I rose, the weight of what I had just done crashed down on me like the Titanic hitting the ocean floor. I walked out, legs shaking from pain and tension, surrounded by doting monks shielding me with umbrellas. And then, just like that, I was outside again, under a slate gray sky, with rain pouring down, cleansing me with grace. As I reached for my sandals, I asked my fellow monks to keep their umbrellas for someone else. I didn't want protection. I wanted to feel it. I needed the earth to drench me in her tears, to mark this moment, raw, sacred, and real. I walked barefoot back toward the covered pavilion, toward the cameras and the crowd of well wishers who waited with alms and balms, knowing what we had just endured physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The gathering after ordination had the texture of something ancient and sacred, something that didn't need words to explain itself. The air was thick with reverence, not just for tradition, but for the simple act of devotion that each person had come to honor. There was love in their eyes, unmistakable and unself conscious. It poured out toward us like warmth from a hearth, steady and undeniable. Their joy was not for spectacle, it was for what we had become. I felt the first dissonance of my new role, my new persona. As monks, we were not permitted to bow in recognition or respect. The gesture that had always been second nature passed back and forth with dignity. That was now reserved only for the laity. We could only receive it. It felt disrespectful and false to not mirror their humility, their generosity and love. I wanted to tell them, with the tilt of my head or a simple folding of hands, that I saw them too, that I honored their presence, their hopes, their sacrifices, their prayers. But tradition asked for stillness instead of response. It asked that I wear the mantle of monkhood with a solemnity that didn't bend back. As more groups entered the ordination hall to complete their ordination, the sky began to soften. The rain that had fallen hard all morning thinned to a mist, and the air turned thick with rising heat. I felt a growing urge to step away from the press of people, to carve out a moment of silence for myself, to listen inward. But that silence would have to wait. The crowd, now gathered under the covered portico, had waited through that soggy day to meet us. Their offerings, red good luck envelopes filled with bhat, of which to a man was donated back to the monastery for our children's education fund, wrapped gifts, pressed palms, and whispered prayers. were as much a part of the ceremony as the ancient chants spoken inside the hall. Among the gifts, each of us received a box of herbal balms, a quiet gesture of empathy from those who knew what the body suffers in stillness. I held court for a time, speaking when asked, blessing those who came forward, receiving all that was given. Eventually, the tide of attention receded as the next group came out of the hall as monks, and in the hush that followed, I slipped away. Not far, but just far enough to become no one again for a few minutes. I opened the balm box and unscrewed the bottle marked extra strong. The scent hit me. Sharp, herbal, elemental. It was as if the land itself had sent it. I rubbed it into my knees, my thighs, the arches of my feet. The sting came first, then the warmth, and finally a slow, blooming relief that felt almost holy. Of all the things I had been handed that day, it was this, the simplest, humblest bottle, that felt most immediate, most merciful. I would donate the envelopes and the other gifts, but the small bottles and the comfort they gave, those I would keep.